and welcome back to another episode of the Rev Rx Podcast, where we show you how to thrive in faith, family, and health. My name is Chad Potts, and I'm your host. Today's episode is a powerful one. I sit down with Jay Folk, wife of longtime NFL kicker Nick Folk, and we're going to talk about today some behind the scenes from the NFL. You've probably seen the footage of a game-winning field goal. You've probably seen the footage of the game-losing misses. But what you probably haven't seen before is footage of what that looks like behind the scenes. A perspective that we don't often hear from the one holding it all together at home. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what happens when it seems like everyone turns against you in life. We're going to talk about the reality of solo parenting during this season when her husband is pursuing his dream in the NFL. Here's the thing, whether you're in business or you're just trying to keep up with the chaos of life, this episode is going to remind you what really matters. And so I can't wait to delve into this conversation. So without further ado, I introduce to you my new friend, Jay Folk. Julianne Jay, you go by a lot of names.
A lot of names. You can pick one and go with it. And I'll go with
mom, whoever. But man, I'm so excited to have you here on the show. I was just telling you beforehand that, I've had several athletes on the show, and I've never had the wife of an athlete. And so I can't wait to hear what we're going to discuss today. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, no problem. I feel very honored to be on here. I am one of those wives that has a strong opinion on many things. So it'll definitely not be a dull conversation. I can promise you that.
I love it. And I've been listening to your podcast as well, League of Her Own, really kind of giving a platform to athletes' wives, giving us a peek of a little bit what happens behind the scenes, because let's face it, you're the one that holds things together in the family, I guess, during the hectic season. And so we'll get into a little bit more of that. But before we do, I'd just love to hear a little bit about you and kind of what got you to this journey that you're on today. I know that's kind of a loaded question, but
Sure, right.
As much or little as you want to share.
So we've been in the league for about 18 years now. We started in Dallas. That's where I'm from. That's where our home base is. We've got 4 kids, twin boys that are 11-year-old, a 10-year-old girl, and a 7-year-old boy. So this is home base. My family's here. Family's super important to us. And so with Nick's career being as transient as it is, we've decided that we would rather be here and just have a support system around us, because the NFL is super fickle. You just never know the journey you're going to go on, where it's going to take you, what new adventure you're going to be on. So this is home base, but we've been all around the country. We've been very fortunate to experience so many different teams, organizations, meet so many people. When we were babies, we were in Dallas, then New York, and then Tampa Bay, and then Boston. And so we're kind of coming full circle back to Dallas right now, but it's definitely been a journey with many ups, many downs. And like I was telling you earlier, this is the first time, I think, in those 18 years where I feel such peace that whatever's meant to happen, we are good with, whether it's playing another year, which he definitely wants to play and he definitely should play.
Definitely can.
For some reason, just the circumstances didn't come together. We're at peace with that too. So I can just sit back kind of now and enjoy the ride and see where God's going to take us next.
That's a good place to be, where you're content regardless of the outcome. And, so many times we allow the circumstances to kind of dictate our joy and to dictate our happiness, and really finding that joy regardless of what goes on around you. That's key.
Well, and I think it's evolved. It wasn't always that way. Like I said, this has been a long journey. In the beginning, when he first got into the NFL, and I talk about this with other wives, with all the new wives that come in, the rookie wives, I'm like, look, this could be a short journey. It could be a long journey. Mm-hmm. You've got to take each year like it's your last and just enjoy it and embrace it. But however, it cannot be your whole world, because if you focus only on football, then other areas of your life will crumble, or like things that aren't big, you turn into big and they consume you to the point where you can't enjoy the moment. So in the beginning of his career, one miss felt like the end of the world. Like the rest of the week, I would have a knot in my stomach. As the years went on and we started having kids and I became more busy, then I started not being able to focus on those things because I had little kids. And now I'm at a place where I'm like, you've paved this amazing career. I'm so proud of you. But at the end of the day, there are so many other things in life that are important. So I value those milestones that you hit, but we still have 4 kids to take care of. They've got their own milestones. So now, being the grandmother of the NFL, I can really appreciate the journey we've been on and now really enjoy the seasons, because I know there is life after football. Yeah, and it will be okay. Those misses will be okay at the end of the day. So it's very refreshing right now.
Yeah, and you mentioned the fickle, kind of the fickle nature of the NFL. I see it from the standpoint of the fan base.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And, you talked about the knot you have in your stomach with misses and,
Mhm.
especially the life of a kicker, and maybe you can speak to that a little bit, but, it's one of those things you're brought on and you're expected to be almost 100%,
Black or white.
right? Yeah.
That's right.
And if you miss, and especially if you start missing, you'd mentioned the time in Tampa, especially if you miss a couple in a row or three, they turn on you fast. What's that
Yeah.
like with, just the fickle fan base and the
Sure.
fickle nature of, you're expected to perform and it's kind of like you have one job and, no one's 100%.
Right. No, the life of a kicker is really hard. I do not watch games with anyone but my family because I look a little crazy. I don't want people to think differently of me. And so we pretty much have a rule, like my kids and myself, even
That's
though
funny.
my parents and I are extremely close to one another, I have just eliminated, it's just the kids and I, because I'll be pacing, I have this cross I wear for every game and I'll sit there and I'll be like in a little ball praying. It's not something I really want other people to see on a weekly basis, because I still get nervous to this day. However, life of a kicker is hard because it's either black or white. You either make it or you miss it. All right. And a lot of times games come down to those kicks. And what I don't think people realize is that it's not just my husband going out there kicking a ball. There's a whole operation in order for his job to be done the right way. So you've got a snapper who has to snap the ball properly. You have to have the holder who holds it properly, and you have to have the O-line that is blocking so that someone doesn't jump up and block his kick. And so it's this complete operation that all has to come together in perfect symphony in order for my husband to do his job. So there's a lot on the line. And you mentioned Tampa. I mean, when you make that game-winning field goal, there is nothing better. There's nothing better. The rest of the week, you're on this high. However, there have been games in my husband's career where he's been hurt and no one knew it. And he tried to push through because he's so mentally tough. He's such a team player that he tried to push through when he was hurt, and he would miss field goals. And I would wake up to death threats the next day. I mean, literally on my family photos on the computer, people would start sending me the most horrendous messages you can ever imagine. And I'm like, guys, it is a football game. Maybe you've got money on it, but at the end of the day, it's a kick. Like, if you're really dwelling this much on what my husband's doing, we have bigger issues that you need to work on. But it's the reality. I'm not the only one. It happens throughout the league. And you just have to hope you have a strong head on your shoulders and a great support system at home. Otherwise, I could see how it could totally get in your head and bring you down.
100%. One of the things I've been wanting to ask you about is this balancing act. Family life with the demands of a hectic NFL schedule. What does that look like on your side? Because, we don't see that side.
Well,
you live a very public life, but we see we see your husband's side, the very public side of that. But tell us about how what's your experience in balancing those priorities? Yeah.
Well, now that my kids are older, so when earlier in his career, we always moved wherever he played. But then he went through a series of 1-year deals. And so you just never know where you're going to be. And so now that my kids are older, they're all in select sports and they're all in school. I actually stay in Dallas during the season while he goes and plays. So I'm 6 months solo while he plays, which is really tough, not only for myself, but for Nick as well, because my husband is extremely hands-on. He's at every sporting event. He's driving to all the practices, every shows. He's in the backyard with the kids. So for him, he has to go 6 months to where he maybe gets to see the kids once a month. We FaceTime probably 10 times a day, but that's just the reality because of football season, they're working 7 days a week and we're in travel sports right now. And so it's hard. Families are number one priority. And so I am lucky I have my parents here to help. I don't have a nanny, so that's a huge misconception. I don't have any help. I do it all by myself, which is probably why I have a ton of grays these days, because 6 months home with 4 kids is a lot of work, but you get a routine down, you get a system down. I've got great kids, even though he's not here, a great support system, but it's definitely a battling act. There are so many times where we're like, are we doing the right thing? Like, I want you to go pursue your dreams and you're doing amazing, but at the same time, like, you're not at home. But I think Nick does a really great job, and he's so present, even though he's not here. He's calling the kids before they go to school. He's
That's
calling them
cool.
right when they get home. He's calling them before a game. He's calling them before bed. We do prayer together on FaceTime before they go to bed at night.
Yeah. Well,
You're the last thing he talks to before he goes onto the field. So even though he's not there, he's aware of everything going on. But, you know, there's a lot of give and take, and it's really hard. And so you got to have a good foundation, a good marriage in order for it to really work, I think.
yeah. Yeah. The word that comes to mind as you're describing all that is intentionality.
Yeah.
And I've always, knowing what I've known about Nick, and I followed his career for a while. I've always been drawn to kickers for some reason. Like that just seems like it's all, there's very little glory there. There's just
Right.
there seems to be a lot of blame. And so I've always kind of sympathized with kickers. I'm not sure why that is, but
Well, thank you. You're probably one of few, but thank you.
there's all this that has to go right. But then you're the one that takes all the blame if it's a miss. So anyway, but it always seemed like Nick was a family guy, and so it's refreshing to kind of hear that and hear the intentionality that he's able to put into. Okay, I'm not there physically, but I'm going to make it seem like I am.
Yeah, you
And I'm
definitely.
going to do my very best to not just say I'm on the road. Sorry guys, see you in a month. But I love that. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, I think people are always like, Julianne, it's got to be so hard on you. And I sit back and I'm like, I have my family around me all the time. It's physically taxing because there's a lot of moving pieces, but at the same time, it is so much harder on him because he's away from his family. And I know he wants to be here, but life is expensive. We have 4 kids. And so you just never know when it's going to be your last year. So why he has the opportunity to play, we're like, you got to go play. We have 4 kids. We want to set them up for, being able to succeed down the road and giving them every opportunity to do so. And so it's a huge sacrifice, but like we talk about, faith is big in our household. We rely heavily on God and his direction. And when something happens, we have faith that it's his plan. And I think that helps us both to keeping things in perspective. Like if there's ever a time when he shouldn't play, we both feel like we'll get that feeling. God will let us know this is not the time. And so we kind of let him navigate this. And if something ever feels weird, then we step back and we evaluate.
Yeah, love it. And you mentioned to me earlier about faith, and faith keeps coming up again and again. So, I'll just ask you, what role has faith played in kind of guiding you through a lot of these challenges? You mentioned particularly down in Tampa, that seemed to be a tough time for him and probably you guys as well. Tell us a little bit about the role of faith in your life.
Well, I was raised in a Catholic family. We went to mass every week. It was just faith was always a part of our day to day. And so I always feel fortunate that I think about to people who maybe weren't born in a house that had faith and how hard it might be to actually come across and develop that if you weren't guided from the very beginning. And both him and myself were. He was also Catholic. And so we knew when we got married, that was one of our main conversations. Like, what do you see in your household? And faith was always a deal breaker if we didn't have that. But it's really evolved over the years because, like I said, the NFL, there's a lot of highs and lows, and the lows can be really low. And so I think my faith has grown over the years. I think the NFL has actually helped it grow because there's been times when I have been like so worked up over certain things to where I was like, I've got nowhere else to ask but to God. And I've got to tell you this one story. And I think this sums up everything and kind of sums up Nick's career. We briefly talked about my husband played for Tampa. It was a split second. You probably don't even remember it. We were in Tampa 6 months. I had a kid. Our youngest baby was born there. And that was the takeaway that we took from there. Pretty much that's it. So my husband gets hurt. Doesn't tell anybody, plays a game, misses 3 field goals. The next day goes on IR and death threats. We leave. All right. We're like, okay, sorry, Tampa, we're not going to stay here. So we go back. And for the next year and a half, no one would look at my husband. He couldn't get a workout. He couldn't get a phone call. His agents were calling everywhere. People did not want to give him the time of day. And so my kids go to a Catholic school. And so I would bike them to school in the morning. And then I would go in for every day for a year. I'd go in to church and I would pray right after drop off. And I would say the exact same prayer. I would add a few things, but it was almost the exact same prayer every day. I would go in and I'd be like, Lord, maybe this is just me, but in my gut, it is telling me that Nick is not done. Oh, Lord, if Nick is meant to be in the NFL, all I want is an opportunity. And I said this exact same thing. So now we have to look back. I said, I don't care if he makes the Pro Bowl. I don't care if he's the highest paid kicker. I don't care if he sets records. I don't care about any of that. All I care about is he gets another opportunity to show people the type of kicker I know he is. And I said that same over and over again for a year. And one day I got a little discouraged. And so worst thing you can do when you're discouraged is get on your phone and want to text message someone. So I end up getting on my phone. I'm going to text message my mother-in-law, who I'm extremely close to, and my mom. And I put him on a group message. And let me preface this. I love my husband's agents. We are extremely close. I've known them for a very long time. But on that one day, I sent out this text message saying, I don't think they're doing a good job. I think Nick should be picked up by now. I don't know what's going on. And I ended up sending it to his agents instead of my parents accidentally. And I was like, oh my gosh. And Nick goes, oh, Jay, what'd you do? Like one of those, like, oh, this is typical, what'd you do? And I told him, he's like, well, you have to call him. So I call and I apologize. We talked through this. Well, no joke. Not even a week later, the Patriots call. And they say, we want to bring Nick in for a workout. And so the rest is history. However, I have to go back to my faith is, there's been times over the years, everyone's like, well, Nick's not with the team right now. Nick should have gone to the Pro Bowl the last 3 years. Nick, this. And I said, you know what? You can blame that on me because I was very specific and intentional in my prayer. I said, I don't care if he goes to the Pro Bowl, even though he deserved. I don't care if he's the highest paid kicker. So when we're taking different deals, when he should be top 5 and he's not, I was like, God answered every single one of my prayers. So I can't complain about anything.
Yeah.
So we go back to that, it's his timing. And I think that's how, why we feel like we're in a good situation today, because we know God's got this in his hands.
Yeah.
Right?
God's in it. God's taking care of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that too. Those are faith builders. When we pray and we kind of give it to God and then we feel like he answers us, he hears us.
For sure.
That builds our faith. And then next time that tells us, I can trust him. And that's perfect. Thinking about your faith and thinking about where all you've come from. So you mentioned you had the full experience in the NFL, right? You said you were the girlfriend, the fiance, the wife, then now you're kind of the grandmother.
Yes, the grandma, because I'm like the oldest now.
Yeah. What has been some of your biggest pieces of advice to other wives, girlfriends, et cetera, in the league? Because you're using, you've got the platform now for the podcast, and you're using that for kind of some of that. But what's been some of the biggest things you've learned, and then what's been some of the biggest pieces of advice you've passed along?
I think everyone has to kind of go through their own experience, but my, being in every stage, I think it evolves. Like what I would tell to a rookie would be like, the NFL, the average lifespan of an NFL player is 3 years. So enjoy every game like it's your last, because there could be a freak injury tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Right. And so just enjoy, look around, take in all these opportunities, because they are just a blimp in this long road you have ahead of you. I would also say, find your own interests, because if you consume everything around the game of football, it is so easy to lose track about what's important because you're only honed in on one thing. And I've been guilty of that before, where everything is just football all the time. And you just live in this sense of, I'm not an anxious person at all, but like anxiety, like what's next? What's going to happen? Is he going to have a good game? Is he not? And then I just find that if you have your own interests, something to rely on outside of that, that when you have those bad times, you have something else to embrace to kind of get your mind off of it. So I think it's really important. And a lot of the women I brought on to a league of their own are all very successful women in their own right. And when I say successful women, I don't mean they have these amazing jobs. Yes, some do, but they all have found a way to navigate their own journey outside of their husband.
Yeah.
And a lot of these women are in really great marriages. They have been in the league for a long time and they've navigated it with grace. So that's why I tell women, find what makes you tick. Find something that you enjoy. Find something to where you can accomplish on your own. So at the end of the day, all your eggs are not in one basket. So I think that's super important, that earlier in your husband or your boyfriend or your partner's career, you can do that. Then it just sets the foundation for later on in his career. So that when the time is over, I also go back to all these numbers, but like the divorce rate is super high in the NFL. It's like in the 80% between divorce and bankruptcy. And that is because you only know your spouse in one way, and that is as a football player. So when it comes to an end, your lifestyle, your life changes overnight. And so it's really hard for a lot of women to transition in these players. But if you have something else going on and you both have your interests, it's easier to navigate. So I just I just think, make sure you prioritize the right things, keep your friends and family close, make sure you get advice from the right people, and just know that it will end at some point, and that's okay. Life will go on.
Yeah. Enjoy the ride.
Enjoy the ride. I've had so many fun memories for sure.
But you're so right. And see, that's the stories that I've really been getting from the athletes I've had on the show. Yeah, I've had Andre Williams. He was a Heisman finalist, running back for the Giants. Should have had a fantastic career, but injuries derailed him. And he shared with me on my show about how he had a near-death experience that led him to the Lord, which was kind of cool.
Wow. Yeah, we don't all have that epiphany moment right there, but that's amazing.
Right. And I've had Sterling Harris from the Browns, lineman, and his career got cut short by going to prison, which was a whole nother story.
Yeah, I'm sure that opened his eyes.
Yeah. And so you never know what's going to happen next. I love the steadiness. It may not feel that way on your side. I love the steadiness that Nick's experienced. I'm the same age as Nick. I'm 40. I just turned 41. And
nice.
And so, I get that sense of like, man, he's been in the league a while.
Been a long time.
And that's rare. That's really, really rare. And that's something to be able to say, hey, he's really taking care of himself. And, I think that's fantastic. But, along the way, there comes a point where there's an end. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you said that I really, really liked and appreciated was you said, if you see your husband as only a football player, mm-hmm. then what happens when they're no longer a football player?
Right.
And being able to have that foundation in your marriage that goes beyond that. I love that you brought that up. And, that goes beyond, I probably don't have a whole lot of listeners that are NFL spouses, but it goes with really any kind of high demand career, right?
Sure.
Any time that we're on the other end of, our spouse has a high demand career, and at some point that may come to an end, and, being able to see them as more than just one dimensional. Mm-hmm. is so important. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Well, I was also going to say, and this is not the toot the horn of all these wives, but like a lot of the men that last in the NFL have such a great support system. And if they didn't have that, I don't know if they would last as long as they have. Because it is extremely taxing, not just physically, but emotionally, the ups and downs. And there's Nick is very open with me, and I know sometimes he's got he needs someone to hash it out with and just and talk. And I mm-hmm. think that you see all these older players, most of them have longtime spouses, and their spouses mm-hmm. get it and know what makes them tick and knows how to let them unwind so that they can go do their job and be a dad and then pick up the pieces and go about it for another week, because season's a long time and they're just trying to make it longer and longer and longer. And
let's play 18 games and 20 games. And that's a lot. You mentioned the highs and lows, and kind of want to dig into that just a little bit, if you don't mind. What's been what's been the greatest moment that you can maybe point to as part of this journey, and then maybe what's been the hardest part for you?
Sure. So the high, even though I said I don't care about records, I don't, but he does have records, so it's pretty. For me, I just think that since the Patriots, I've seen how he went from not getting phone calls from anyone to really solidifying the type of kicker he is. Mm-hmm. He did break a bunch of records, and he will not talk about them. He will not let me post about them. He is anti-records. He does not want to know them. But as his wife, and I've seen this journey he's been on, it's been a hard journey, and I will give my husband credit. He's the most mentally tough person I think I've ever met. Steadfast. He has this routine. He's diligent. We have 2 kids, and he's the best example of what, if you want to be a successful athlete, just mimic what he does. But also my husband, if you go back to any team he's ever been on, he is so well respected, and that he probably doesn't want me to say this, but he has coaches coming to him before what do I need to do? What should I do? Because he is just so loyal, steadfast team player. He's so smart. And so I just think the highs for me would just see that, I asked God, please help him get back in. And he totally surpassed anything I could have possibly imagined. He holds the record for most kicks under 50 in the NFL history. He holds the record at the Titans and the Patriots. And even though records will just be in a book one day, they're just numbers. Just for me, I'm it just proves that hard work, and even though you've been knocked down, it is rewarded down the road. So that would be a high. It's just like how he's overcome and how he's at the top of his game, even when so many people said, hey, you're not good enough. Hey,
He's
you're
done.
old. You're old, you're 40, you're weak. We're going to go with these guys that can kick 63 yards. They can't make a 40, but they can kick this. Let's just let pass. So,
right. A long miss is just as bad as a short miss.
It blows my mind. Don't get me started because I'll probably get myself in trouble for talking about it. But like, just everyone's into the show these days. And it's like, there's something about being steady and being consistent. And we're looking past those things. And it will come back to bite you in the butt. And it does more times than not. And so I tend to sit back and just laugh and watch and be like, I see decisions people are making. And I'm like, okay, you're going to learn the hard way. But
that's right. And it's tough when you can see it and they can't.
Nick and I are constantly like, what are they doing? Like,
what are they thinking?
It blows my mind. What, we can see this from a mile away. What are you doing? And then it comes back and we're like,
told you.
We could have told you that. We could have saved you a lot of time and a lot of money right there. But
that's right.
Yeah. And I guess for when it comes to low, the lowest would have been I guess there's two. My first year with Nick was very hard. He was misdiagnosed by the Cowboys. They told him he had a muscle strain, but he tore his labrum. So he went to a specialist in Vail who did Tiger Woods and Lindsey Vonn surgery. He's a hip specialist. And he went up there and they're like, no, you need hip surgery. And it's like an 8-month recovery, but we're going to do this May 5th. And you're going to go to training camp because we just drafted another kicker. So you have to go compete. So you're going to kick in 2 months. And so my husband's like, okay, if that's what you need me to do. And that was his last year with the Cowboys. So if anyone's a Cowboy fan, they're probably like, oh, I remember that year. It was brutal. He was not ready. And it just didn't make sense. He went from Pro Bowl to have like a really high percentage to missing kicks. Like something would tell me something's going on. So my birthday is right before Christmas. He plans me this surprise party. And then right before the party, he gets this phone call from Jerry Jones saying, hey, we need you to come into the facility. And he's like, okay. And they cut him on my birthday right before we have a surprise party for me.
No.
But he held it with grace. And then it ended up being a blessing in disguise. We went to the Jets and had 7 years there, had babies there. Everything's great. And then probably the lowest of the low was when we went to Tampa and he was hurt and missed 3 field goals in one day. And I just saw him just battling mentally and it like to kick through the pain when he probably knew in the back of his head, I probably shouldn't do this, but he's such a team player. He's not going to quit on anyone. But it was really good for him to go through that because now he knows if I'm injured, I'm going to tell somebody. And I think we've appreciated the journey way more now that we've seen how low it can be, the death threats, going a year with no one wanting to look at you. So I think it's made these last couple of years that much better because we've seen how bad it can be. And now we appreciate every moment going forward.
And I love that there's kind of a part 1 and part 2 there.
For sure.
In his career. And, kind of a lot of people would have been done. A lot of people would have said, nobody wants me. I'm done. I'm going to go do my thing. But not Nick. He kept on at it. He had the faith. He had his faithful wife and had her faith with the prayers and everything.
A very stubborn wife. There was actually many conversations where he's like, I think I need to hang up my cleats. And his agents were like, it might be time we have that conversation. And I'm very loud, as you can tell. I like talk, and I was like, no, I don't believe that. And I was very adamant, like, nope, I do not believe that. And they kept on saying, no one's calling me. It's time. I'm like, I do not believe that. I am not giving up on that hope. And I think I was pretty much the only one. So I like to rub that in his face all the time. Like, if it wasn't for me, who knows? Yep. Because I was the one that said no. And right. I was right. So
yeah. Well, and there's something to be said about you being his best and probably loudest cheerleader.
Yep. Yeah.
And you know him better than anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you were so faithful to say, Nick, I don't think so. I see something in you. Maybe nobody else sees it, but I see something in you. You're not done. And then here he goes on. In the last 2 years, he set records for completion percentage of field goals. And, he's not just kicking little short things either. I mean, he's
no. He had some big kicks, a bunch from over 50.
I feel like he's my age and in his prime, and I don't understand that.
And I don't think teams do either. That's why we're without a team right now, because I don't think eventually they can think, how is a 40-year-old still kicking 50 plus consistently, like they're waiting for something to drop, and it's just,
and it hasn't.
we'll
So any
see.
NFL execs out there listening, you need to get on the ball. You
He's
need
ready
to
to
give
go.
Nick a
Yeah,
call.
he's strong and ready to go, and in a good headspace, and
just a great
there's something
family
to
too
say about that
for the
veteran
organization.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about your kids just a minute. What is it like? I just want to. This is for personal reasons. What's it like growing up to be the son and daughter of an NFL player? Like, do they realize kind of who their dad is and how public his life is, or kind of what's their take on it? I know they're a little bit older than my kids. I have three, and they're 3, 5, and 8, so they're a little under yours. But I can kind of get the sense of what they might be realizing.
You know what? It's really cool because when you start in the NFL, you never think that you're going to have kids old enough to actually appreciate and know what you're doing. And it's a joke now. It's like, oh, the kids are going to be playing when you're playing. But, we're big. Like it is a priority of ours not to let our kids get big heads about anything. So we bring things down really quickly in our household, but they live for watching Nick play. They think it's the coolest thing ever, but Nick is very present. So everyone is so used to him around all the time to where it's not a big deal anymore. So for them, they'll go and talk about like, oh, I'm going to see my dad watch this game. And then their best friends are like, what? Is that a picture of Derrick Henry? Or wait, why did you sit in Mark Sanchez's box when he was playing? Like there's that aspect, but it's because he's the kicker and they've been around it so long now. Now it's kind of like, oh, that's just what dad does. And they live for those games and they love it. But I think they're pretty realistic about, knowing like he's paved his way. I've got to pave my own way. So just because he's a famous football player doesn't mean I have bragging rights because I haven't done anything yet. But I will say this. So my kids are really good athletes. My twin boys play on the MLS Next team for FC Dallas, and
nice.
They practice 5 days a week. Some days they're gone 5 hours a day. So I think the biggest takeaway they've gotten is seeing Nick's work ethic and seeing that in order to be an elite athlete, you have to put in the time, you have to take care of your body. There are sacrifices you're going to have to give up. And so I think that's probably the greatest gift that they've gotten is they now know if I want to be elite at something, whether it be anything, sports, acting, whatever, you have to put in the time. And so I think that's the greatest advantage my kids have gotten is nothing is out of reach for them because they've seen their dad plays in the NFL. But at the same time, in order to get that, I have to put in the time. So when they're saying, no, I can't go to a sleepover because I have an 8 a.m. game, to them, they're like, that's normal. Like, I'm okay with that. Whereas a lot of kids these days are like, well, I want to go to the sleepover. I want to go have 5 bags of candy. And I'm never going to be a professional athlete where my kids are like, well, I could be and so I'm really proud of all of them for what they're doing right now and super curious to see how far this goes. But Nick has been a great example. And I'm a runner for Nike. So like we're very athletic in our family. And
I was going to say, you're an athlete yourself, aren't you?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'm a good runner. So I'm like, yeah. So that's, yeah. So yeah, it's really cool, but it's not the end all anymore.
Yeah. I love it. Well, thanks for your transparency and your honesty with this. Yeah. I'd just love to give you an opportunity to give us a pitch on your show. Sure. Tell us about A League of Our Own, kind of, where to find that and all that.
Yes. So this is our first season of A League of Our Own, and it follows high-profile athletes around different leagues, MLB, NFL, actually going to do some with the rodeo. So like any avenue, it's these amazing women who have their own stories, their own accomplishments, kind of defined and paved their own way while navigating the sports and parenthood and just how they do it with such grace. It's pretty much the anti-housewives show. So when we started the show was because I was so tired of the narrative that was out there, what it was actually like to be married to a professional athlete. And because you see their shows, and that's probably like 1% of what it's actually like. So I wanted people to get the real inside truth about what it's like to be married to a professional athlete. And so we have coaches' wives. I have Mike Tomlin's wife, who was amazing. We've got quarterbacks' wives. We've got MLB players. And so Clayton Kershaw's wives, Ellen was phenomenal. So it's really, I think the biggest message I want to get across to is that just because you're married to an athlete doesn't mean you only wear one hat. You can be a mother, you can have a career, you can be a wife, entrepreneur, you can do it all. And you don't have to do just one thing or be defined one way. So these women are debunking all those myths, and they're all so unique, and they're also accomplished in their own way. So
Yeah,
that's my skill. They're all amazing. They all have an amazing, incredible stories. So
yeah, when it's awesome, you give them that platform, and just appreciate the work you're doing. Appreciate you sharing with us today. This has been fantastic. I've just absolutely loved picking your brain about what's it like. And,
so fun.
there's so many lessons I think we can learn from this, but above and beyond all, I think it's how to prioritize family, regardless of whatever you're facing, the high profile jobs or whatever. Family, because, family can kind of get lost in the shuffle, but you guys have found a way to prioritize it despite the difficulties. And I'm going to say, if you guys can do it, we can do it too. So
you can. And it is a lot of work.
Mhm.
So it is a conscious effort, but I just feel like if you go in and you do it right from the very beginning, your life down the road, all the wonderful memories you're going to make, all the opportunities your kids are going to get, it's going to be worth it. So that's the way I approach it is, you got to give your time now so the rewards down the road are even greater for not just you, but for your kids and your family and everyone around you.
Yeah, love it. Thanks, Jay. Really appreciate you being here.
Oh, thank you, Chad. This was so fun. Anytime I love your platform as well. And you were so easy to talk to. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Rev Rx Podcast. We hope you enjoyed what you heard today. And if so, we'd love it if you would hit that subscribe button so that you'll never miss a new episode from us. Also, feel free to leave us reviews and comments, as we'd love to hear from you. Be blessed and be the very best you.